Welcome to worship at Cincinnati Friends Meeting. I'm Jim Newby, the Minister and Public Friend at the meeting. Our worship this morning will consist of a brief message by me, followed by a time of meditative silence, what Quakers call open worship. The silence will be broken by Kathy Stewart, a member of Ministry Council, and my companion on the facing bench this morning. She will be asking about joys and concerns. For those of you in the meeting house, if you're led to speak out of the silence, please stand and a microphone will be brought to you. Please be sure to introduce yourself for our Zoom participants. And I ask that our Zoom participants do the same. Scripture reading this morning comes from Paul's letter to the Church of Rome, just at the beginning of chapter 12. I appeal to you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that you may prove what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. I love the Christmas season for many reasons. One of those reasons is it provides me the opportunity to once again reflect and speak about one of my favorite authors, Charles Dickens, as well as his most famous literary character, Ebenezer Scrooge. My interest in Dickens extends back to my childhood, but I was awakened again to Dickens' work when, as an adult, I first visited the Cheshire Cheese pub in London in 1982. It was at the Cheshire Cheese that Samuel Johnson and Charles Dickens would sit for hours, keeping their guests and fellow Londoners entranced in conversation. On the front of the menu at the pub, it reads, newly remodeled. Newly remodeled for them means that it was rebuilt after the Great Fire of London in 1666. So you know the long history that that pub represents. Throughout the Christmas season, I have thought often about my experiences at the Cheshire Cheese as we are being treated with Charles Dickens' work in movie version, A Christmas Carol. For those of you familiar with the work of Dickens, you know that at the heart of much of his thought and writing, there was an empathy for the suffering and the oppressed of the world. It was this compassion for humanity that was rooted in his own childhood experience of poverty that motivated so much of his writing. From the writing of A Christmas Carol, which was released in December of 1843, until his death in June of 1870, Dickens' vision of a society redeemed through love and generosity filled his works. So what makes A Christmas Carol such a popular story and movie? Is it because of its depiction of human misery that appeals to our kinder nature? Perhaps. Is it because of its portrayal of how the cheer of the Christmas season can cause us to live above our troubles? And like Scrooge's nephew Fred, find a reason to be merry and optimistic? Maybe. I believe that the primary reason it is such a well-loved story is centered in the fact that Ebenezer Scrooge was not just comforted by the message of Christmas, nor was he just educated by the message of Christmas. No, Ebenezer Scrooge was transformed by the message of Christmas. He was changed, radically changed. Here was one who was confronted with his own selfishness, and he experienced a remarkable, dramatic turnabout in his attitude, his ideas, and his behavior. How did such a turnabout happen? What were the stages that Scrooge went through to finally reach that place of redemption? Or in the words of Paul, how did Ebenezer Scrooge move from being conformed to this world to being transformed by the renewal of his mind and heart? I believe that there were at least three stages. The first stage of redemption for Scrooge was what we can call estrangement, or the condition of being separated from God, estrangement. Such estrangement is not generally recognized. Early on in A Christmas Carol, Scrooge didn't think of himself as estranged from God, as much as Bob Cratchit and nephew Fred tried to show him his misdirected ways. And friends, many in today's world do not recognize their estrangement from God either. There are those, unfortunately, who trust in things more than God, persons who seek after power and prestige rather than servanthood. Those who go along unthinkingly with many of the structures of society that demean the poor and shame the outcast and the asylum seeker. And although they would never admit it openly, a part of them secretly agrees with Scrooge when he asserted, it is enough for a person to understand his own business and not to interfere with the business of others. Mine occupies me constantly. A second stage of redemption is what can be called chaos and confrontation. Chaos and confrontation. Chaos in one's life is always uncomfortable. It moves us out of familiar patterns and known ways. It causes us to reevaluate what is important, how our lives are being lived, and if we heed the signs, sets us on a journey of seeking more of what is missing. For Scrooge, the ghosts of Christmas past, Christmas present, and future were the bearers of chaos and confrontation. Whatever else we thought the meaning of life was before we encountered chaos, or chaos encountered us, we can come to know something completely different about life as our quest to know God and be known by God becomes central and primary. Like Scrooge, what we used to make fun of, we'll find ourselves doing. And what we used to do, we'll now walk away from. The third and final stage of redemption through which Scrooge passed was transformation. The amazing thing is that human personality can be changed, can be altered, and can be redirected. It may seem that the lines in our lives are drawn and that there is no way to change them. Scrooge's question is one that we all ask as he speaks to the third spirit. Are these the shadows of the things that will be? Or are they the shadows of the things that may be only? Men's courses will foreshadow certain ends to which, if persevered in, they must lead, said Scrooge. But if the courses be departed from, the ends will change. Say it is thus what you show me. The scene shifts with Scrooge looking down at his own grave. The spirit was immovable as ever. Scrooge crept towards it, trembling as he went, and following the finger, read upon the stone of the neglected grave his own name, Ebenezer Scrooge. Am I the man who lay upon the bed? He cried. The pink finger pointed from the grave to him and back again. Spirit, he cried, tight clutching at his robe. Hear me. I am not the man that I was. I will not be the man that I must have been before these visions. Why show me this if I am past all hope? Good Spirit, your nature intercedes for me and pities me. Assure me that I may yet change these shadows that you have shown me by an altered life. To be redeemed involves a process of recognizing our estrangement from God, experiencing the chaos and confrontation which comes with the recognition of such estrangement. And finally, redemption leads to transformation. And what did that transformation look like for Scrooge? He was made into a new person by the enlargement of his faith. In the words of Paul, he moved from being conformed to this world to being transformed by the renewal of his mind and his heart. And in the words of Dickens, he became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city ever knew. As we have gathered here for worship this morning, I'm well aware that there are many persons to our south who are dealing with the aftermath of vicious storms that have killed loved ones and destroyed whole towns. For them, the Christmas season of 2021 will be remembered for the pain and the heartache that tornadoes always leave in their wake. As we enter into a time of silent, expectant waiting, may we hold all of those affected by Friday and Saturday storms in God's healing light.